want you 3 minutes after 9 on Friday the 15th of April, an historic day because the campaign officially launches. Yes, the EU referendum, epoch-making, whichever side of the debate you're on, whether you are a Remain or whether you're an Exit, we all agree it is a massively important vote. The official campaign starts now. And with me in the studio opposite is UKIP leader Nigel Farage. Mr Farage, before we start taking calls, is it going to be a good, clean fight?
It hasn't started very well, is it? I mean, today's the official launch of the campaign, which probably is why last week Mr Cameron decided to spend 10 million quid's worth of our money sending leaflets through our door telling us what we should think and how we should vote. That wasn't very clean, was it? In fact, even the Electoral Commission said it was against the spirit of the referendum. So I don't think it's got off to a very promising start. And remember, there's a lot at stake. I mean, backing the Remain side, we have the big investment banks like Goldman Sachs, we have multinational corporations like Siemens, and we have the political class and the civil service class who've made so much money out of the European project. The vested interests will fight like crazy to keep something that has been very good for them.
But they would argue, of course, Mr Farage, very good for Britain. Thousands of jobs dependent on it. Better for security, they even argue better for border control. Like, you know the list, I don't need to go through it.
I do. I mean, some of the things they say are so ludicrous that they insult the intelligence of the population. I mean, the idea...
But they are intelligent people, Mr Farage. Whatever you say about them, people who... And you know this is your game. People who run financial institutions, people of this... big businessmen and big businesswomen, even politicians. These are bright folk, Mr Farage.
Yeah, look, if you're Goldman Sachs, if you're Siemens, this is the best form of lawmaking that's ever happened in the history of mankind. Back to the caves. Because actually, the laws in Europe are made by the unelected European Commission. They propose legislation, and big businesses effectively get the chance to set their own rules for their own industry to stop small and medium-sized competitors coming up, and perhaps challenging them. So I get why big businesses support it. And, I get why civil servants, I mean, goodness me, go over to Brussels, all right? Top rate tax for somebody working in the European Parliament or the European Commission is 16%. That's why thousands of them over there are paid more than the Prime Minister, with 2/3 final salary pensions and 8 weeks holiday a year. Don't be surprised that there are people that support this. They've done well out of it. The people that have suffered are ordinary families, ordinary workers.
Workers who have workers' rights, though, I read, as a result.
There's not much point having workers' rights if you're unemployed. And there's not much point having workers' rights if your earnings are lower now than they were 10 years ago. And this is why Mr Corbyn is left in this very awkward position that many on the left in Britain 25 years ago thought the EU is going to be great. It's going to give us workers' rights. But now what they're seeing actually is British workers being substituted by cheaper European workers.
It's interesting you mentioned Mr Corbyn. Put your headphones on, Mr Farage, because the first call is referring to that, and that speech yesterday. Andrew's in Docklands. You're through to Nigel Farage. Go ahead, Andrew.
Yes, good morning there. My point was, I had a sort of shall we say, an allowance for Jeremy Corbyn, thinking this guy's heart is in the right place. But when I saw him come out in favour of backing all of those big corporates to stay in the EU, I think as Nigel just sort of pointed out, to me that was the end of it. You just realise that both those parties are about corporatism, and the collectivists need the banks, to fund all of their sort of failed projects, and the banks need to be bailed out by socialism. This is where the people in the middle, the likes of the small and medium-sized companies and the regular, honest, decent workers suffer. I just wondered what Nigel's view was on that.
Well, I mean,
Mr Farage,
Jeremy Corbyn is a Bennite, a supporter of the late Tony Benn. Corbyn was against the common market back in 1975, and consistently through the 70s, 80s, 90s and noughties, Corbyn spoke out against the lack of democracy in the European Union and against the growing influence of the big, and you've just said it yourself, Andrew, corporate businesses. Now he says it isn't very good, but it's the best we've got, and we must stay with it. Next he'll be saying that he believes in global capitalism. I just don't know where this guy is. What I would say is this, that he was so unconvincing yesterday in terms of what he was saying, that you felt he was a Labour leader, frankly, just going through the motions. Unconvincing, and let's see if over the next 67 days he can maintain this facade that he likes the European Union.
How conflicted is he, in your view, in reality, Mr Farage?
Nobody that believes in parliamentary democracy, and this was Tony Benn's big point for 40 years, nobody that believes in parliamentary democracy can support the European Union as it is currently constructed. Whereas I've mentioned earlier on this programme, the unelected, appointed commission have the sole right to propose law. And Corbyn is, or at least I thought he was, a Democrat. His problem is this. His party will tolerate him on unilateral nuclear disarmament. But under Blair, the Labour Party became so pro-EU that if he was to speak out in favour of leaving, they would get rid of him. And whatever the consequences within the Labour Party, so he's trapped by his own parliamentary party.
Andrew, they're mentioning small, medium-sized businesses. There is a school of thought that for many of them, of course, Nigel Farage, a Brexit would be a lot of hard work, could even be disastrous. Let's suppose I'm running a company and I sell, motor parts, racing motor cars or whatever. I'm going to have to do 27 different deals, aren't I, to get my parts into...
Right.
Well, this is what I read, Nigel Farage.
All right, let's talk about business, shall we? Let's talk about business. Do you know, only 5% of businesses in this country trade with the EU. 95% don't trade with the EU, okay? Of our economy, about 12% of our economy is exports to European Union countries. And yet, because we're part of this ridiculous EU/single market, we have to apply legislation that is made in Brussels, not to the companies that sell the 12% to the EU, but to 100% of our companies. What sense does that make? There are 5 million men and women out there running their own businesses, acting as sole traders, being bound by a set of rules and regulations over which the British Parliament has no influence and is irrelevant in the sense that they don't trade with Europe anyway. The whole thing doesn't make sense.
Kizzy is in Chesterfield. Go ahead, Kizzy.
Oh, good morning, Nigel. Good morning.
Hello, Kizzy.
Nick, hi. I wanted to speak to you about a little bit more about tax. Now, I heard today that the UK is going to be doing some deals with some of the European countries on tax evasion. But I wanted to ask a quick question about inheritance tax. And it's a two-part question. The first is, should David Cameron have actually paid inheritance tax on the $300,000 from his father's estate and the $200 from his mother's? And do you think that was fair? And would you yourself be giving away any money to your children in the same way?
If I had a significant estate, and I've got 4 kids, if I had a significant estate, Kizzy, I would, in a few years' time, think, well, given my lifestyle, I might not last that long.
We can't kill you, Mr. Farage. We've thrown you out of planes, you've been in road accidents, you've had other serious ailments. I don't know what it is, but they can't kill you. Do go on.
Well, so far so good. So, Kizzy, the law is, if you give a gift to one of your children and you live for 7 years, after that gift is made, they can avoid paying.
And you'd avail yourself of that if you had funds.
Well, let's just think about it. So whatever money I've got, I will have earned and paid 40% tax on, maybe even higher, okay? And then the idea that when I die, my kids have to pay another 40% on that money is double taxation. I think it's monstrous. So the answer is, Kizzy, I do not blame the Cameron family. I mean, there are lots of things on which David Cameron and I disagree, but I do not blame the Cameron family for doing what they've done in any way at all. I really don't.
And you would avail yourself of similar legal opportunities, just to the final point of Kizzy's question.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Quite a quick response from you, Kizzy, before we move on.
No, that's great. I just wanted to know, really, why.
And you've got to know. That's what you do get often from Mr. Farage. Kizzy, I must move on. Thank you. Philip in Dartford, you're on the radio. Philip, go ahead. Good morning.
Good morning. Hi, Nigel.
Hi.
And congratulations for getting this referendum.
Thank you.
Fantastic work. My point was about the leaflet. I couldn't understand how it could only cost £9 million if we're sending 27 million letters out with a first-class stamp costing more than 50p. That seemed that the postage was going to be more like £14 million alone.
Well, Philip, there was obviously a big bulk deal. If you mail out in significant quantities, then the price the post office charges a lot less than, I think it's 64p now for a first-class stamp.
Is, yeah.
Unbelievably.
Extraordinary.
So that's why it cost what it cost. But let me just tell you, Philip, I was so appalled to get this leaflet and to see that it was sent everywhere. I was appalled they did it. I was even more appalled with the content, where they actually had the cheek to tell us that if Britain votes to remain in the European Union, we will maintain control of our borders. I mean, where do these guys get off? So, Philip, what I've done is I've urged people to sort of quote Elvis Presley, return to sender. So I've made an appointment, and at 11 o'clock this morning, I will be walking up Downing Street with a couple of my colleagues, and I will post the leaflet back through David Cameron's door. And I recommend that as many of you as possible send the leaflet back to Downing Street. And whilst you're doing it, why not put one or two comments on it about what you think about this?
Have you added comments, Mr. Farage?
Oh, I've got a long letter with it. And actually, I finish up by saying, if you, Prime Minister, believe the contents of this leaflet to be true, which I don't, I will debate with you, head to head, this leaflet and its contents, anytime, any place, anywhere.
Just one quick question, Nigel, if I can. They say that a lot of the young people in the country are going to vote to remain in the EU. Do you think the young people in this country realise the chances of them getting a job if there's 600,000 people from the EU just registered for national insurance?
Well,
and their chances of them buying a house, because all these people have got to live somewhere, decrease so much. I can't believe that anyone who's 20, 25 years old would want to let 670,000 people come in, because it's going to reduce their chance of buying a house to be able to...
Yeah, no, I get that. I get that, Philip. I mean, look, last week, I spent 2 days in the Netherlands, just outside Amsterdam, because there was a referendum last Wednesday in the Netherlands on the EU trying to extend to take Ukraine into its orbit. And I was campaigning, Philip, and I spoke at a big meeting, just outside Amsterdam, and the room was full of people in their early 20s. And the Eurosceptic movements in the Netherlands, in France, in Spain, in Greece, are all young people. And yet, you're right, there is a slight problem here. Why is it that British youngsters do not appear to be as Eurosceptic as their colleagues across the continent? I honestly think this has got something to do with our universities. Our universities do not even pretend to be neutral on the European question. In fact, they're campaigning actively for Britain to remain in the European Union. And we now have, Philip, 300 what are called Monet professors in British universities, where the European Commission pays for a chair to teach history or economics from an EU perspective. So I think there's been an awful lot of propaganda, Philip, aimed at our youngsters, but you're quite right. We've got to get that message out there that an overcrowded Britain makes it bad for them to get into the workplace and virtually impossible to get on the housing ladder. And I will try and do so, I promise you.
Philip, thank you. We move on. Ben in London Bridge. Go ahead, Ben.
Hi, good morning. My question to Mr. Farage is that what is his take on the fact that politicians can have a relationship with a prostitute, or is there anything wrong with having a relationship with a prostitute?
This is the John Whittingdale story, of course, the culture secretary. It was revealed earlier in the week that he'd had a brief relationship with what's known as a sex worker, dominatrix.
He was a single bloke. He met her through a dating website, as I understand it. He didn't understand the job that she was doing. Non-story.
Do you buy this idea that's been put forward by Hacked Off that there should have actually been more coverage of this story because the newspapers in a way didn't cover it because they wanted to be able to have this hanging over the culture sector?
No, look, come on. It's one of those stories. It was covered. We're 48 hours on and we're just about discussing the tail end of it. It's not really a story.
Philip's in Wimbledon. Go ahead, Philip.
Morning to you. I rang Ken and Dave some weeks ago when IDS quit his job. And I actually turned around and said at the time that the next thing he'd be doing is running into the arms of you, Mr. Farage. Would you welcome him on board UKIP, or would he be too big a beast for you?
I don't mind Big Beast joining UKIP. I haven't got a problem with that. But to be honest with you, Philip, I mean, look, UKIP is very important. We've got a massive set of elections coming up on May the 5th. But really, I think your question is more important in the context of the referendum, and that is, will I work with them and will they work with me? All I can say, Philip, is that we've just announced that on Monday evening, I'll be up in Stoke-on-Trent, and I'll be there with two Tory MPs, Peter Bone and Tom Pursglove, Kate Hoey from the Labour Party, but significantly, Chris Grayling will be on that platform with me on Monday evening, and that's the first sign of people coming together, putting aside differences, preparing to work together to win this referendum. So the answer, Philip, is I will work with anybody.
When are we going to see you on a platform with Boris Johnson, Mr. Farage?
Well, as I say, Chris Grayling's the first one to do so. Yes. I'm happy to share a platform with Boris if he's happy to share.
Has that been mooted?
I've spoken to Boris very briefly in this campaign. Let's see what happens. But,
right.
but I repeat the point. I have tried ever since the general election last year to bring all the sides together, and I will go on, working with anybody.
Philip, let me ask you, how powerful would the combination of Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage be in your book?
Well, I tend to see Boris Johnson's a bit of a scruffy herb, to be honest with you. But so I think he and Zach Goldsmith. I mean, Goldsmith seems to have someone with him every time he's campaigning in London. So there's them two. IDS, I think, will probably be powerful.
Right.
Mr. Whittendale, you've just mentioned. I think that they would be powerful. But I am pro-Europe. I'm sorry to say, as far as you're concerned. And to be quite honest with you, I think that you're flying a kite as regards leaving Europe. And I think that you're hoping that things were going to come on board, but I think maybe the vested interest in the media barons may wind up being against you in the end.
Philip, let me just tell you something, Philip. Unlike most people in politics, I actually had a proper job before coming into politics, and I gave that up to do politics, not because I was interested in climbing the greasy pole, not because I was interested in playing the games of party politics, but because I passionately believed that this country was heading in the wrong direction in terms of its relationship with the European Union. And you can agree with me, you can disagree with me, but let me promise you, I'm absolutely sincere. I want to win this referendum, and that matters to me more than almost anything in the world.
Text, tweets and emails. Graham in Bushy, do you now regret standing on the Grassroots Out platform alongside George Galloway?
No.
What is the level of...
And in fact, can I just say that what we've done in Grassroots Out is to put together the most extraordinary coalition of different groups that has ever been achieved in the history of politics in this country. And I was very keen to get the left on board, very keen to get representatives of the trade union movement, very keen to get, the Kate Hoeys and people like that from the Labour Party, but equally keen to go for those further to the left on the spectrum. So George Galloway and Respect are part of Grassroots Out, as are the new Communist Party of Great Britain. Now, whoever would have thought, Nick, that I would be prepared? But yes, because as far as I'm concerned, whatever differences, I mean, Galloway has said the most extraordinary things about me, that I should effectively be barred from public life and all sorts of things. But there's a greater prize, and you have to put aside normal differences if you agree on a major issue. So no regrets at all.
Any regrets that Grassroots Out didn't get the official designation and Michael Gove won, you lost?
Well, look, we have two groups. One of them's got the official designation. We haven't. But you know what? It doesn't really make that much difference. We can still spend a very great deal of money. UKIP alone is allowed to spend £4 million in this referendum campaign, as against Michael Gove's £7 million. So whichever way you look at it, look, we've all got the opportunity to raise and spend lots of money. We've all got the opportunity to go out there and campaign, and we've all got the chance to go and reach our own target audiences. So you know what? Good luck to Vote Leave. That's fine. The fact that Grayling and I are coming together on Monday shows you there are some positive signs that we will be working together.
And you've spoken with Michael Gove. How would you characterise your relationship with Mr. Gove?
I've always liked him, always admired him.
So you're getting on fine over this?
Yeah, I've always admired the man. And look, as I've said, if I can work with George Galloway, I'm sure that Conservative cabinet ministers can work with me.
Pavel is in Twickenham, and you're through to Nigel Farage. Go ahead, Pavel.
Hello, Mr. Farage. I'm Polish. I've been living here in the UK for 9 years. I'm actually going to vote for Britain to leave EU because I passionately hate it. And I believe it should be destroyed, as your MEP colleague, Mr. Mikke. However, I would like to ask you the question. What do you think is going to happen with EU citizens living here in Britain? Will we have to reapply for some kind of leave to remain, job permits and so on? I know you're not going to make the laws, but what's your opinion on this?
Well, Pavel, anyone that's come to this country legally is here legally, and therefore, of course, will be staying. But what we will do in the future is be much stricter about who can come. Because one of the problems, Pavel, is this, that, we've opened up the doors to 10 former communist countries, of which one is yours. And because so many people have come, we've effectively closed the doors to people coming from New Zealand or India or other parts of the world with whom historically we've had very close links. So it won't be as easy, Pavel, for people to do what you've done and come to the United Kingdom. And when we get a proper system in place, based along the principles that Australia uses, you will have to show us that you've got a trade or skill to bring, that you haven't got a criminal record, and and that you're prepared to pay your own health insurance.
Won't this
for the first
restrict
few years.
opportunities for Britons to go and work on mainland Europe, Mr. Farage?
Well, just look at the ratios. The ratios are that for every Briton that goes to work on mainland Europe, between 4 and 5 people from the EU come and work here. And this is the story.
So the truth is it will be difficult for Britons who want to go to mainland.
If they've got skills, if they've got skills to take to Europe and they're wanted, they'll go. But can we stop thinking just about Europe? There's a big old world out there, And actually, important though Europe is, in economic terms and in terms of significance, it diminishes with every year that goes by because there are new emerging countries and economies all over the world.
Quick response from you, Pavel.
Well, I'm just thinking that you should pitch that to the EU citizens who live here in Britain.
Yes.
You should tell them what's going to happen, because their uncertainty may swing the vote. They may vote to stay in EU because they will be uncertain of their future. If they were more certain what's going to happen, I can assure you there's a lot of Polish people like I am who think that European Union should be destroyed.
Do you know, whenever I meet Polish people out on the street, I find, like you, Pavel, they're even more Eurosceptic than I am. And I suspect that's because just 26 years ago, the country was run from Moscow for the communists. They got freedom, and now they've joined a club that has centralised power, makes their laws, and some are beginning to worry, are we slipping back into something somewhat reminiscent of where we came from? So keep up the good fight.
Thank you for that. Mr. Farage, I wonder if I could ask you a question. Last week you appeared in the Lunch with the FT, as in the Financial Times column, which is a regular feature in which prominent businessmen, political leaders and others go and are taken to lunch with the FT. And I remember famously the media mogul Richard Desmond once ordering a very expensive bottle of red wine and copying some criticism for that. Could you take my listeners through what you had as regards liquid refreshment for your lunch with the FT?
Well, it was a Friday. Look, it was a Friday. It was lunch with the FT. We went to my favourite pub in the city of London, the Lamb in Leadenhall Market. It's a wonderful old pub, wonderful old market in Leadenhall. And we had a couple of pints of...
You had 6 pints?
No. Now, come on.
The FT says you had 6 pints.
But this is typical journalistic licence. I did not have 6 pints. I had 3. Okay? Right. He had 3, so he's hamming it up a little bit.
Bottle of wine?
We shared a bottle of wine.
2 large glasses of port?
1 large glass. The next one was quite small.
And he ordered goat's cheese, the journalist.
Well, it was lunch with the FT, and they said to me, look, you choose where to go. So I chose an old chop house in the city where I used to go regularly, and I ordered...
This is in your stockbroker days, presumably?
Metal trading days.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I ordered the Edwardian pork chop with a sausage, fried egg, bubble and squeak and chips. Now, you'd like that, Nick, wouldn't you?
I would, in the old days.
And he then ordered the goat's cheese and phyllo pastry. So I'd taken a vegetarian to about the most carnivorous restaurant in the country, which wasn't a great start.
We move on to other questions. Margaret in Dundee. Margaret, you're on the radio. Good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm sorry, don't know who I'm speaking with.
It's Nigel Farage, the UKIP leader, and Nick Ferrari. I'm Nick, and that's Nigel.
Oh, I'm right on to you now.
Yes, I see you're on now. Yes, so put your question to Mr. Farage. Go ahead.
Yes, very quickly. It's about TTIP. Now, I don't profess to know a lot about what's going on here, but I didn't like what I heard about legislation, which is in America, where companies can sue if a politician puts forward a legislation that affects their profits.
Well...
And now, if we stay in the EU, is that likely to happen?
Okay.
Hold on. I will come back to you, Margaret. I know Mr. Farage is keen to jump in.
Let me just in 30 seconds try and explain this to the audience.
Particularly those who I know what TTIP is, but it's quite complex.
TTIP, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, is a proposed deal between the European Union and America. On the face of it, it's about free trade and removing tariffs. Fine. But actually, it's about a lot more than that. And what Margaret's referring to is there is a disputes mechanism within this, a panel which goes above national parliaments and national courts, whereby it is entirely possible that big American corporations will be able to buy chunks of the National Health Service. Okay? And so, Margaret, that's what the worry is. Now, how Jeremy Corbyn can advocate we stay part of the European Union when TTIP is an ongoing negotiating process over which the British will not be able to have a veto right because we'll probably get outvoted on it, I don't know. So Margaret, you're right to be concerned. And all this goes to show is that what I'm saying in this referendum is, for better or worse, we should make our own trade deals. we should run our own steel industry. We should regulate our own banks and be in charge of our own country. And that way, I think we've got more chance of getting legislation that is closer to what we want.
Quick response from you, Margaret.
Thank you very much.
All right, that's the response I like. Thank you. Derek and Rotherham, you're through to Nigel Farage. Go ahead, Derek.
Hello, Nigel.
Morning.
Your deputy, Mr. Nuttall, last week in Sunday Express described our country as Alcatraz UK because with Eastern Europe, they're releasing all their convicts. They're coming over here, committing crime. They're overcrowding our prisons. We can't send them back because of Human Rights Act, because their prisons have got to come up with theirs to match ours. They've got to be match ours. And it's costing £150 million a year to keep them here.
And just to remind the listeners, this is a 240% rise in EU convicts filling our jails, as you correctly say, sir. Derek, £150 million. And yes, your colleague Paul Nuttall saying this effectively becomes the EU's Alcatraz. Nigel Farage.
Derek, I have nothing to add to what you so eloquently just said. You've just outlined the case for us having proper border controls. We want immigration. We want positive immigration. We want immigration that makes the country better. We don't want foreign criminals and gangs using free movement rules to their advantage in this country. And do you know something? It's just common sense, isn't it? Surely common sense says that when people come to live in your country, you as a nation check that they're good people who are going to contribute to society. And the problem, Derek, is, we had Pavel on the phone earlier, who's a Pole who's been here 9 years and clearly doing well and working hard and speaks beautiful English. But people like him actually are probably suffering a little bit of prejudice in their lives because of the people that Derek is talking about. We want migration to be managed, balanced and controlled, and we will not be able to control who comes to Britain if we vote to remain in this European Union. And ultimately, I think that is the big question on the 23rd of June.
Last question from me for today, Nigel Farage. You and I are having this conversation the day after it was revealed that 2 Iranians tried to get across the channel in an inflatable dinghy with plastic oars. Are we going to be seeing more of this?
The message that has gone out from Mrs. Merkel to the world is, please, everybody come. You're all very welcome. And that's what's happening. And the EU, I sat next to Mr. Juncker earlier on this week. He said, we're really doing well. We've managed to return 325 illegal immigrants into the Greek islands. I said, well done, Mr. Juncker. 1.8 million have arrived and you've sent back 325. It's hardly a victory, is it? So that's the message from the EU. And the message, I'm afraid, Nick, from the UK is, if you come to Britain illegally and get caught, your chances of being returned anywhere are lower than 1 in 4. So the message from the United Kingdom is quite clear. If you seek to gain entry illegally to this country, you will almost certainly get away with it. That needs to change.
UKIP's Nigel Farage, thank you.